Greetings, you wonderful warriors of the broken sword. I'm Jonathan,
I'm Nick.
and we are the Gosslings, a digital speakeasy of free thinkers, Christian authors, and explorers of the esoterica. And my oh my, do we have an awesome interview for you today?
Got the MASTERCLASS for you today
Yes.
from the great Stephen Pressfield.
It is our second fireside chat with Uncle Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Quarterly thing that we do with Stephen Pressfield, where we talk to him about all things writing. And man, we went over some amazing stuff. This was our best interview with Stephen Pressfield yet. And we are extremely honored and blessed that he spends time with us.
Yep.
And we are so appreciative. And we know that our patrons enjoyed the full exclusive interview. And we have the public version here for you guys that we will get to in just a moment. But first, obligatories, toast, all the good things.
Yeah, let's do our toast. Let's start with the toast. And quick shout out to those toasting with us today.
Oh, yeah.
We got Chris Caps, Cactus Kicker, Maggie May,
Tricky.
and a tricky subject.
Yeah.
And did I miss one? These are the people that have actually commented in the chat. If you have not in your... Oh, Mike Fisher's watching. Hey, Mike.
What's up, Mike?
What's up, my man? If you have not commented yet, do so now. Join us with our toast. If you're lurking, lurking back there.
The lurkers.
I see you watching. I see the numbers.
The liquor guy.
But if you would, grab your drinking vessels, your toasting vessels.
Yes.
And I believe you lead this time.
I would be honored to, in honor of my favorite author, Stephen Pressfield.
I think it's apropos.
All right, grab your drinking vessels and join us. Here we go in our liturgical toast for the Goslings. Take up the broken sword of your father.
And strike down the darkness.
Amen.
Adios.
The last remnants of the coffee.
Tastes like the lamentations of the women.
Dude, I have this awesome shirt that it's a Venn diagram, and it says to see your enemies, to see your enemies driven before you, and to hear the lamentations of their women. All three in a Venn circles, all overlapping, and in the middle is the Conan sword.
Nice.
Yeah. It's glorious.
That's cool. That's cool. You know what we're missing? We're missing music. That's what we didn't have time. We were kind of in a rush between the interview we just finished up and going live, so I didn't have time to get everything teed up. So our personality is going to have to fill in as background white noise. Do I have the personality of white noise or what? Is that a thing?
Nick's over there just... Nick is a liminal space.
Thanks.
And I am like the irritating AC unit that needs to be replaced, but just keeps making noise and dripping on the carpet.
This. I'm the squeaky ceiling fan. And the chain bouncing against the light. Right. If you haven't yet, we would love it if you subscribe. That help us greatly. Take up the broken sword of your finger, strike down the subscribe button, and hit the bell.
Strike that bell. Strike it like it owes you money. Keep your YouTube pimpan strong. Is Wayne Brady going to have to choke a bell? Eat your sandwich, Dave. Eat your sandwich.
And quick shout out to ChericoPottery.com.
Yes.
Cherico Pottery makes these beautiful Kothon Spartan mugs, handcrafted, each and every one, hand painted. They are the replica of what the Spartans drank from. Designed in collaboration with Stephen Pressfield, of course,
very
author
apropos.
of The Gates of Fire. Yeah, very apropos for this tonight's live stream. Go over to ChericoPottery.com and check out the master craftsmanship of Joel Cherico over there.
Yeah.
Get yourself a Kothon.
Fantastic.
Drink like a man. Buy a Kothon.
Yeah. Get a Kothon. Drink like a man. And when you're done drinking like a man, you can wipe your pig's blood broth out of your manly pate with the help of Jardani Jovanovic. Jardani Jovanovic hair and skincare products made by real men, made for real men. Or as I like to say, be as sexy as you are deadly. Give 007 a run for his money. Awaken your inner John Wick with Jardani Jovanovic hair and skincare products.
Manly pate. It's my favorite line of the night.
Mike Fisher is the owner and proprietor of Jardani Jovanovic, and he is a good friend of the channel. and he is always there supporting us. In fact, he sent us a couple of books that I want to give a shout out to real quick. One is Birthright by Tim Alberino.
Ooh.
Yeah, pretty good. And the other is Omega Dynamics by Jamie Walden. So big shout out to
Cool.
Mike for hooking us up with
Yeah,
those. And he
thank you,
actually
Mike.
recommended that we get Jamie Walden on the show. So I got to look into that for maybe like an August live stream.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
It would be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. We always like to circle back to that kind of like prepper warrior mentality thing. That I'm big on warrior culture. So masculine warrior culture is a big thing.
Yeah.
In my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you know, Nick, you have been using the F1 formula for your hair growth, and I got to say, like, Nick is starting to grow some rocking.
Still can't see
mutton
it.
chops.
You guys still can't see it, but by the end of the summer, it'll be visible and nice and even and full and not patchy. And
yeah, it's taking shape though.
I'm gonna catch up to you.
It's looking pretty good.
I'm gonna catch up to you at some point.
I think at a certain point, when you left me, you were but the learner. Now you are the master. You know. The apprentice has become the master.
Yeah, we'll see.
When the student is ready, the master will appear.
But I have been using the F1 formula, and it feels so good to put it on. I sometimes cheat and do it twice in a day, just because it feels so like it feels good to put on, and it smells amazing.
That's the same thing with like the shampoo and conditioner.
Yeah.
You know, and the beard oil. Those are the three that I use from Jardani Jovanovic. Out of although you can see the products behind us, he's got a killer logo. I mean, dude, for like my Heavenly Realms books, this is like catnip. You know, like for sure, because Michael has a goatee. You know,
okay.
He starts out with a beard, and then he gets blasted by a fireball from Lucifer in the first act, and it like scars his face. So after that, he can only grow a goatee and a top knot.
Oh, okay.
And for sure, like he would have used Jardani Jovanovic.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, for all his ceremonial stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So.
I think I've seen you make. I think you've seen some of your drawings of Michael with the top knot and the goatee. Yeah.
Roxana kind of replicated.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
For her painting.
Yeah, she's coming back too, right?
We are going to have Roxana back on June 1st. So I think it should be this upcoming Thursday at 8 p.m. live for a Thirsty Thursday episode where we're going to talk about Roxana Barahona Oliva. That is her full name. Also known as Roxana B.O. Arts.
That's right.
Yes, which you can find her all on social media, Roxana_BO Arts on Instagram, stuff like that. But we're going to talk about AI and artwork because she is a smart cookie and very talented. Yeah. So yeah, we're interested to see what she has to say. But
Cactus Kicker says, speaking of masculine warrior culture, I'm enjoying Imperium Falling.
Oh, nice.
Beheaded cherub roast in a fire at the mines.
Yeah, that's the moment where you realize that like this book is not playing around.
Yeah,
you know, when Homeboy gets beheaded by another angel, and there's like this whole thing that goes on, and like that's where you know, like, oh, this isn't Narnia. Oh, okay, this is less Narnia and more Thermopylae. You know. In fact, I actually modeled. There are these cool. I have all these different types of angels in Heavenly Realms, all these different warrior types, and they're all modeled after different types of real warriors, and everything throughout history. And I have this one type called the Cognoscente, and they are like the cherubic elites. They are like the Marine Raiders, the Marine Corps, of the cherubim, who are the warrior caste, and they are all just like totally ripped off of Leonidian Spartans.
That's awesome.
The Lycurgi era, Thermopylae era Spartans.
That's awesome.
So, oh yeah, they're so hardcore. They're in like two of my favorite scenes in Imperium Falling. So, I'm glad you're enjoying it. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Cactus. And that means a lot coming from Cactus, by the way, because Cactus, if I remember correctly, Cactus, you are a retired Marine. So that's pretty cool, man.
Very cool.
You're gonna dig some of those books, man, because like I'm big into like that military culture, and I hope it shines through.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it does.
Yeah,
I'm sure it does.
You're my target demographic. So,
speaking of retired Marines,
yes,
we have a Stephen Pressfield interview.
Stephen Pressfield, man. Yeah, dude. Here's the thing. Stephen Pressfield is everybody probably knows him from being on Joe Rogan a couple of times, writing The War of Art, being on Oprah. Like we said, he's like a real deal, like almost household name. He wrote The Legend of Bagger Vance. But what a lot of people may not know, unless you dig into his backstory, is he joined the Marines during Vietnam, and I don't think he was ever deployed. So he was stateside. I think he maybe joined the reserves, but you can feel a lot of that Marine boot camp Paris Island culture bleed through in Gates of Fire, especially with Polonikes and the broken noses. And, you know, there's some really awesome scenes that, like, when you read it, you're like, oh yeah, that's for sure Marine Corps. That's awesome. But he doesn't come off as that guy. Like, he doesn't come off as, like, you know, a real, you know, hard-nosed, hard charger kind of, you know.
Yeah, but it's all internal, though.
It is. He's internalized all that stuff in a very healthy way. It's magnified through his discipline as an artist and as a writer, and his stick-to-itiveness. I mean, he wrote for 30 years until The Legend of Bagger Vance was published. That's, I mean, you want to talk about dedication and discipline.
Yeah.
Up at 4:30 in the morning every day to work out.
Yep.
You know, at 80 years old, 81, something like that. Yeah. I mean, dude, the guy is rocking it. If I could even make it to 80, I'd be impressed, let alone like lifting weights, you know?
Yeah.
So he's trained with Rudy Reyes before. A former Force Recon guy, Fruity Rudy. You guys would know that from Generation Kill. And yeah, he's just cool, man. Yeah.
Tricky says the only thing Marine about me is my whale noises.
That's an awesome callback to our Jay Reese Bradley interview from our second Thursday.
Yeah.
That joke got a lot of really good traction, by the way.
It was great.
People thought it was hilarious.
It was so good. Yeah. She's such a great sport.
I know, she's so much fun.
Yeah.
So
all right, well, let's get to the interview with Steven Pressfield.
Yeah,
hope you enjoy it. We'll be back halfway through to chat with you guys. And I think you're going to get a lot out of this.
Oh, yeah. Cactus says, let's see. You know the difference between cover and concealment. That's right. Cover is something you hide behind to protect you. Concealment is simply camouflage.
Yeah.
So it's the difference between a car door and an engine block. Something to keep in mind.
That's right.
In the meantime, Steven Pressfield, Foolscap Masterclass.
That's right.
It's awesome stuff.
Here we go.
Vertical punch.
Your YouTube feed is crap. Stop wasting your time watching bot-boosted shills and self-appointed gurus cloying for your attention. Instead, join the Gosslings interview live stream and podcast. The Gosslings, a dark-lit digital speakeasy of free thinkers. A super chat of radical truth-seeking wizards who eat trolls for second breakfast. Topics that'll make your mama's hair stand on end. Ideas that'll make your pastor's knees knock. Guests that will illuminate the hidden chambers of your mind. And interviews that strike down the darkness. Welcome to the Gosslings.
There seems to be a strong correlation between addiction and creative personality types. I know that there's a direct correlation between nicotine usage and ADHD, but I was wondering, what are your thoughts about the relationship between being addicted to something, whether it's alcohol, drugs, tobacco, and being creative?
It's a great question. And let me just ramble on a little bit here, Jonathan.
Yes.
It's like, first of all, I should say I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. You know, I could be, don't anybody do anything I say, you know, because of what I say. But I think you're absolutely right. And I think, you know, the theory of resistance with a capital R from, you know, which says that there's something in the human psyche that resists doing the work that we know we have to do, finding our real calling, you know, right? We're always, there's an element in our head that's going to push us, distract us, and push us into something else. And I think a lot of times that something else becomes an addiction, right? If we're, in other words, rather than write, we drink. You know, rather than create our art or follow our calling, we get into drugs or abuse of others or porn or any of the other things, self-dramatization. You know, you can be addicted to so many things. And I'm serious, really, John, really, absolutely. And I think there's an absolutely direct connection there. And um, like the addiction becomes a kind of shadow version of the art or the work that we really should be doing. You know, for instance, if it's really our calling to write the drama of heavenly realms or whatever, and we haven't, and we're not able to raise the courage to face that, or to face that on a ongoing basis, we might instead create drama in our lives, you know. And it's like, where am I going to score my next, you know, hit of whatever the latest drug is? What terrible neighborhoods do I have to drive into at, you know, 3 a.m? What dangerous people, unstable people do I have to deal with? Lots of drama, right? You call up your brother at 3 a.m. Oh, 5 guys just beat the crap out of me. You know, I'm in a, you know, come and get me, right? Or I'm in jail or whatever.
Yep.
So the addict, in a way, sort of, her or his addiction becomes their shadow version of the novel or the movie or whatever it is that they should be actually writing. So my own theory is that if somebody is in the throes of addiction to something and are trying to get their way out of it, it needs to be replaced by something else. And what it needs to be replaced by is whatever their true calling or vocation is. I know I've told you this story before, but I'll tell it to you again. Directly above my house here, if we looked out this window here, right up the hill, is a house that used to belong to Billy Jack. Do you remember that movie? Have I told you guys this story?
No, you haven't.
I don't think I've
No.
heard this.
You remember the movie Billy Jack and its sequels?
Yeah.
It was Tom Laughlin was the guy. Anyway, Billy Jack was a huge hit. And Tom Laughlin was the actor and producer who put that movie out. Bear with me, this is kind of a long story.
Yeah.
And but he also was a kind of a renegade Jungian therapist, that he sort of evolved this on his own. And I actually, you know, he had a seminar up at his house and I went to it, you know, like a 2-day thing, you know. And what he taught was people who were really sick, like terminally ill, like they had been to every doctor on the planet, they finally would come to him. And what he would say to them, he might say something like, let's say it's a woman, she's 83 years old and she's got some horrible cancer. He would say to her, did you ever have a dream, like when you were young, an aspiration, a calling? And the woman would say, well, you know, I always wanted to be a concert pianist. And when I was a kid, blah, 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 blah. And he would say to her, okay, start right now, go back to the piano and be serious. If you have to rent a grand piano, get an instructor, bump it up. In other words, reconnect with the dream. And what he was really saying was, as it gets back to addictions, was that the disease was a shadow had happened because they didn't face their calling, didn't pursue their dream. And so instead, that energy turned into a tumor. But that energy could also turn into an addiction. And the bottom line was that people would, like, say the lady would start playing the piano again and her cancer would go into remission.
Yeah.
And so, in other words, I think when we have a dream or a calling or whatever it is, and we don't act on it, this is our soul talking to us, right? We don't act on it, that energy doesn't go away. It doesn't just vaporize. It turns inward and it turns negative. It has to find an outlet. And that's, I think, what a lot of addictions are. They're the shadow version of a real calling that we should do. And while I'm blathering on here, I'll say one other thing, you guys. Yeah. One of the big differences between an addiction and a calling is that an addiction produces instant gratification. As soon as that needle goes into your arm, you feel great. Your troubles will go away. But a real calling and a vocation is the exact opposite. It is about delayed gratification. It's about
Yes.
working for 3 years alone in a room before you finally produce, your novel or your movie or your album, which then goes out and completely fails, right? In other words, it's the pain, but that's the reality of life, that
Yeah.
anything that's good requires pain and requires effort and requires, a level of commitment. And the things that are easy and that immediately gratify you are always bad.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah.
that's my part of my answer about addiction.
That's really great. I always, because we're Christians, and I sometimes wonder about these. I'm always thinking about things of the spirit and how they might manifest physically, in the physical world. And I ponder those things, and it's nice to hear you, speculate on that, because I've wondered if some manifestations of illness have been something that we've been repressing, or something negative inside that we don't deal with, that decides to manifest in a different way because we weren't following something that we were supposed to follow, or dealing with it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that we might call evil, the root of them is actually good, but that good thing has been channeled, blocked, and it goes into a bad channel.
Yeah. It's energy can't be created or destroyed, only transferred or transformed, and nature abhors a vacuum. So I mean, yes, 100% to everything you're talking about, Steve. If you don't take that thing, whatever that is, and take that energy and use it the way God, the muse, whatever wants you to use it in that regard, it'll mutate. It absolutely it becomes corrosive, like true cancer. Cancer is good cells that just mutate into bad cells. And it is, and I've watched that happen with people. I've watched people not pursue their calling or give up on their dream. I've had droughts where like resistance is just kicking my ass,
Sure.
and it's the worst feeling in the world. You feel like your soul is constipated,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a sickness of the soul when you get into that thing. That's where the pain is coming. It's not in your body. It's in someplace else. Yeah.
Yeah. And addiction is like this demon, because I wrestle with smoking cigarettes, and like the cigarettes, it's like I started smoking cigarettes because it was a palliative measure because a girl broke my heart. And then I know, right? Like the lamest.
Bitch. Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Don't get me started, my friend.
That's awesome. We agree with you, by the way.
Yeah, she is a bitch. But and then later on, it sort of became this thing that I used to help me focus. I would write a chapter, and then I would go outside and have a cigarette, and I would think and mentally edit, and be like, oh, I should change this word, or I should tweak this, and it's kind of been like that for a long time. But what I noticed, it seems like the demon of addiction is a thing that like its usefulness, or your usefulness to it, will outlast its usefulness to you. Like you'll stop needing it, but baby, it still needs you.
Yeah,
that'll preach, man.
It's good. I mean, but you've been writing for a long time. Have you ever seen anybody in that situation where maybe they had an addiction like that they wish they could quit, and they were artistic parallel at the same time?
No, I don't think so. But I do think that, of course, I don't know that many people that are artists or writers. I try to avoid knowing them, but I certainly do think that, if you look at somebody like Keith Richards, where a lot of times it sort of goes back and forth. You go through a creative period, and then you kind of fall into another, into an addictive, and then you come out of it again. And I think it is, to me, it's about resistance. Just because you did something great on February 3rd doesn't mean on February 4th you're not going to be, completely screwed, because the demon is right there waiting for you,
Yeah.
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 Uh,
I appreciate
So,
you saying
but-
that, because the worst feeling in the world is when I get up early to write and I get a lot of tiny little things done unrelated to writing, and then I have to get ready and leave for work, and I've gotten no writing done.
yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
It's that constipation feeling.
On the
so
other
to
hand,
speak.
we got to give ourselves a little bit of a break. And like Jonathan, it's okay if you smoke a cigarette every now and then,
Thanks. Thanks, Uncle
You
Steve.
have
I
my
appreciate that.
permission to take a break. I used to do that too all the time. Exactly
you
the
really?
same thing. Yeah,
Yeah, and you quit though eventually. I think,
did.
right?
Eventually I did. Yeah.
I mean, do you mind if I ask you how or what went into that, or
Okay.
would you rather?
Actually, it's sort of I got into Hermetic philosophy and the Kabbalion. Have you ever heard of that stuff?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know you guys would know about this. Anyway, the one of the principles of Hermetic philosophy is that there's no such thing as opposites. Everything, like heat is not the opposite of cold, and courage is not the opposite of cowardice. That they're all just points on a continuum, and that the difference between the points on the continuum is the vibration,
hmm
the vibrations that we feel at the time. And so I said, I was working at an ad agency at the time, and I noticed that whenever I was really on the spot to have to get on my feet and perform, I'd have to have a cigarette. And so I thought, let me take my vibrations at that point, which are vibrations of fear, and I'll change them. I'll move those vibrations along the spectrum to vibrations of independence. I'm not dependent on a cigarette. And I just did it, Jonathan, I just did it 3 times. Like I wanted a cigarette and I just kind of did that one, I did that vibration thing. And then again and again, by the third time I quit.
Oh, that's so
However, I'll
cool.
say this, like about 5 or 6 years later, I went back to smoking.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
and I tried that again and it didn't work. And what did work, where I stopped the second time, was my niece, Meredith, who was like 10 years old at the time. I was visiting her dad, my brother, and I went outside to have a cigarette in the driveway. And she kind of came out and she said, "Uncle Steve, that's not good for you. You should stop." And so I just said, "Okay, Meredith, if you want me to stop, I'll stop." And I did stop.
That's really sweet.
God only knows why. So those are my 2 times.
That's so cool.
Out of the mouths of babes, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I know. Well, there is like a biblical concept, a New Testament concept that talks about that sort of thing where all things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you can do that. And it's not, for you, maybe in that moment, in that season of life or that context, it's not a sin, as we would call it. But it's like a spectrum, like you talk about worst, bad, neutral, good, better, best. You know what I mean? And you can kind of be on that.
Yeah.
So when you talk about shifting your vibrational state, do you mean I'm making like such a Western translation out of this, a Western brain. Did you do like cognitive reframing of that state you were in, of like harnessing that energy and saying, no, I'm going to use this instead? Or was it just more of an innate?
I definitely tried to change my vibrations,
Interesting.
And I don't even know how I did it. Just mentally, I just said, I can feel how I feel right now. And the frequency is high.
Yeah.
So let me kind of tune that frequency down a little bit.
Oh, that's cool.
I don't even know how I did it, but I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Goals were the only 2 things that ever helped me. I gave up cigarettes for Lent this year. And then in the past, the only 2 times I've ever been able to give them up were when I was trying to get in shape and run for the Marines. And then again, when I was trying to get on with Metro PD. And because I had to run, and I hate running. I'm awful at it. So you need like every bit of help you can get. And
yes,
it's like it's like 9 months, 9 to 10 months each time, But man, the second that rejection letter comes, so, anyways, that's really good advice, Steve. That's awesome to hear about. Thank you.
All
I
right.
want to ask about the
Oh,
work he's been doing on.
yes. Okay. Yeah, because I think we're what, like half an hour in?
Yeah, yeah,
It's already the half-hour mark.
Yeah.
Okay. I know you wanted to talk about this, and we wanted to really talk about this too. Let's talk about the Foolscap Method.
Okay.
I love the Foolscap Method. I did it for the first time today with a book that I've been working on, Roman Coke and the
Nice.
Sasquatchalypse.
Ah,
And I'll tell you, I've been working on this project for 8 years now. And even though I'm 180 pages into the first draft, and I got a 5-6 foot wide dry erase board in the living room filled with notes about all these characters and plots, I'm stuck. I'm absolutely stuck. And having this thought process codified on paper with the Foolscap Method, I actually started thinking about it in a different way today. It started to sort of crack the iceberg.
And Jonathan, did you get that from my stuff on Instagram?
I watched your Instagram reels. I love your Instagram reels on it. And then you had a couple of it might have been Black Irish Books, actually. It might have been their account, but there were a couple of YouTube videos as well where you're talking about it that are several years old. But your Instagram videos. Oh, really? Might want to call Sean.
Must be AI.
Maybe it was. I don't know. But your Instagram reels and your videos talking about the Foolscap Method are insanely good. And I'd never even heard about it until I saw you make those videos. So, yeah.
Is there a specific place or question you'd like to?
Yeah, no.
Where do you start?
Nick had all the questions.
Well, I remember last time you recommended that when you're doing the Foolscap Method and you're approaching a story, that you should write the climax first.
Yeah.
That I should do. That you should do what?
They should write the climax, the big fight at the end.
Right. Yeah.
The conflict at the end. You should write that first. After you do that, though, what point to the Foolscap Method do you go back to? Where do you go from there? Because what if you don't even have a genre or really a
theme,
a narrative?
Let me maybe I should just go back to the beginning and sort of describe what it is. For people who haven't heard of this. First of all, this gentleman here, Norm Stahl, who died just a little while ago, is kind of a friend and mentor of mine, and he's the guy who taught me the Foolscap Method. And this is how it came about. I know you guys know this, but I'll tell it I was working on my first novel many, many moons ago, and I was totally screwed. I lost, and Norm took me out to lunch, and he said, I told him my problem, and he reached into his bag and he took out a yellow legal pad, and he said, Steve, God made a single sheet of yellow foolscap paper to be exactly the right length to hold the entire outline of a novel. And that was sort of a breakthrough thing for me, because I was like creating these monstrous Bibles of, 150 pages describing everything. So the thought of just doing it on one page, writing the whole thing out, breaking it down into its constituent elements, and putting it on one page only, was a real breakthrough for me. I thought, that I could do. I could figure that out, right? So since then, I've sort of evolved my own version of what's on that page, and so these are, here's the thing that I did on for Instagram, and I'll tell you what you want me to go through all of these things.
If you don't mind,
if you'd like to,
is these are the sort of questions that that I use to ask myself about a new project. This is at the very beginning of a project, when you just have a germ of an idea and you're asking yourself, is this worth a shit? Do I like this? Is this going to work? And so you're trying to get a handle on what the story is and if it's any good. And so, like I was said, Nick, like at the very end, I have number 10 is the climax, but I don't know if you can see that, but I think it's a great place to start is, how does this story end? Because so many times if we don't do that, we'll get like 3/4 of the way through and we'll go, well, I'm lost. I don't know how it ends. So if we're writing Moby Dick as an example, and we can say to ourselves, in the final moment, Ahab harpoons Moby Dick and he becomes entangled in the lines, and the whale and him are fighting, and the whale goes, that takes him down with him, right? And the ship sinks and everybody dies. If we know that, that's our climax, right? And we can write that on a yellow foolscap page by just saying Ahab and Moby Dick duel to the death, one line. If we know that, then we can start to work backwards from there and say, well, how do we build up to that great moment, you know? So that's why I say this is an old screenwriting thing of always start at least know what the ending is. Don't, you know? Now, having said that, I have done many things where I didn't know the end until I got to it. In fact, one book of mine, Killing Rommel, which is about a British Special Forces unit fighting in the North African desert against Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, the great German guy. I realized I was like 2 years into this, Jonathan, and I realized, I don't have a single scene in this story that has Rommel in it. I said, don't we think we ought to, Steve, shouldn't we have a scene with Rommel? And that, of course, was the climax of the whole thing, which I should have had at the beginning. So anyway, I'll just go through these points and hope they're helpful to people.
Yeah.
The first thing on this list is genre. So I'll ask myself of a project that I have, what kind of a story is it? Is it a love story? Is it a Western? Is it a detective story? Is it a combination of science fiction and detective story like Blade Runner? And that's not so easy sometimes to know what the genre is, right? But once you've got the genre, it's a huge help because let's say we decide, like the book that you have there, A Man at Arms, that you're showing behind you there, is it's set around the time of the crucifixion, and it's about a badass one-man killing machine of the ancient world. And as I was trying to block this out, I asked myself, what genre is this? And I realized this is a Western. Yeah. So there are certain conventions to a Western. I'm sorry if I'm blathering on here too long.
I love it. Yeah,
this is great.
Okay, so I thought, what are the conventions of a Western? And one of them is that it takes place in a landscape beyond the law, whether it's Mad Max in a post-apocalyptic thing in Australia, or it's Clint Eastwood, out in the, in the spaghetti Western things, right? Mm-hmm. So I said to myself, a big part of this story takes place in the Sinai Desert. And I said, oh yeah, that's right. Check that. Number one, a wilderness beyond the law. Another aspect of a Western is that it has usually a male hero who is a gunslinger. Basically, if it's a samurai movie is also a Western. Mm-hmm. A lot of detective stories are also Westerns. And he's a man who goes to violence as the default. And so I said, okay, my hero, my man at arms hero, he's that kind of a guy. So good, that's great. So I know we've got two things there. Then another thing of a convention of a Western is there's almost always a vulnerable character, maybe a woman, maybe a young child that somehow touches this badass's heart. Yeah. And he comes to the defense of that. Like in Unforgiven, it's the prostitutes that the Clint Eastwood character works. In Shane, it's the young boy played by Brendan DeWilde, et cetera, et cetera. So I have this young girl in the story, And I also know in a Western that the final scene has always got to be a shootout between the bad guy and the good guy, right? That has to be the final scene. So now as I'm starting to put all these things together, I've got some answers here. Like number 3 is hero and villain. So now I ask myself, okay, who's the hero? Who's the villain? Now, if we go back to Moby Dick, the hero is Ahab and the villain is the white whale. Or in my story, Man at Arms, the hero is my Man at Arms guy, Telamon, and the bad guys are the Romans. So I've got that. Now, beyond that, I know in the climax that a storytelling principle is hero and villain clash to the death. So I go, okay, now I'm starting to put the story together a little bit, in the most vague terms. Another thing, number 2 up here, Nick, is what I call Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. I'm a big believer in 3-act structure. And so, okay, so let's say it's Moby Dick. I ask myself, okay, Act 1, Ahab and the Pequod set out after Moby Dick. Act 2, Ahab and the Pequod, the ship, chase Moby Dick around the world, searching for him. Act 3, they find him and they duel to the death. That's all we need. We write that out on one line on this yellow page. And now I can say to myself, okay, there may be a lot of little incidents and scenes in there, but that's a pretty good arc, or if it's the searchers, it's the young girl gets stolen by the Comanches. Act 2, John Wayne goes after him. Act 3, John Wayne catches them.
Yeah.
So it's for me, trying to evaluate the story, I can ask myself, if I'm a reader or a moviegoer and that's the story, am I going to be interested? And I can say, yeah, I think I will be interested. So anyway, continuing on,
It's great.
I know this is exhaustive detail, but you guys asked me, so I'm going to give it to you.
Our people are going to love this, Steve, truly.
Number 4 is what it says narrative device. Now, what that means is, again, this is a question you got to answer. Who tells the story?
Yeah.
Is it the omniscient author, like in most thrillers where you cut back and forth to scene, or is it a particular character? And for instance, in To Kill a Mockingbird, the narrative device is the girl Scout, the daughter of Atticus Finch, right? Who's 9 years old or 8 years old, whatever she is. She's the one who's telling the story. And everything, and we have to ask ourselves, is this the right way? Like if we were writing To Kill a Mockingbird, we might say, maybe it's third person omniscient author telling the story, or maybe it's Atticus Finch telling the story. Maybe it's Tom Robinson telling the story, right? We sort of have to ask ourselves, what works, right? What fits in with what so anyway, that's what narrative device is. Like in The Great Gatsby, it's the character of Nick Carraway, who's like the friend of Gatsby, but has certain distance from him. In Catcher in the Rye, it's Holden Caulfield telling the story in the first person, his interior monologue, et cetera, et cetera. So you really can't write word 1 until you know who's telling the story.
Absolutely.
Right? What's the narrative device? And then, to get even more complicated here, like let's go back to Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah.
It's not Scout as a 9-year-old girl telling the story. It's Scout as a grown woman remembering what it was like that summer and telling the story through her younger self's eyes. And why is that important and why did that work? Because Atticus Finch had to be seen as a hero, as a knight in shining armor. And who better to do that than his daughter, who adores him, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's narrative device.
All right, everybody, there's the first half.
That was a really hard break right in the middle of it.
It was.
More to come, promise.
Yeah, that's just the first half. And man, we just we want to make sure that we recognize how generous Steve is with his time and his energy. Here's the thing. Steve did not hold back the juice, the secret sauce on the Foolscap Method. It was so cool. Like the Foolscap Method, he takes probably 30 to 45 minutes, maybe something like that, in our interview, and he goes over everything. And I follow him on Instagram, and that Foolscap Method has been broken down into a series of videos that he and Diana did over the course of probably 2 months, 2 or 3 months, in little bite-sized increments, you know, and he did us such a massive solid. He wanted to talk about this. We wanted to talk about addiction and creativity, and then he volunteered the Foolscap Method, and he went through the whole thing. He basically took everything that he compiled with Diana on his Instagram page for the past 2 months and just dumped it right here for everybody. So like, you know, and you know, we appreciate everybody kind of like being cool and hanging through like the whole, you know, hermetic vibration thing. Like, you know, here's the thing, not all of our guests think the same way we do, you know, and you know, we believe in Jesus and Steve believes in the muse, you know, and like there's overlap on the Venn diagram, but like we don't think any less of him or judge him for it or anything like that. Like people have different ways of communicating these things, and we really appreciate everybody, like, you know, not getting so like uptight or spun up over like, because man, like
that's the great thing about our community, though. They don't get uptight about that.
Everybody's cool, everybody gets along, and everybody appreciates what an extremely generous, sterling silver, golden soul Stephen Pressfield is, and how incredibly loving and kind he is with his time, and
he is
just powerful, man. It's been really awesome. So like, and the thing is, this is probably the 5th, maybe 6th interview we've done with Steve so far. And I'll tell you, for anybody who's enjoying this, and I know like Cactus, I know you've been really digging it. Some of you other guys have been really digging it as well. Do us a favor, with Steve's interviews specifically, if you don't mind, spread the word on those. Send those interviews that we've done to your friends, post them on social media if you still have it, you know, post it on any sort of message boards or anything like that. We have got to get the word out about these Stephen Pressfield interviews, because every time he gives such amazing
wisdom, man. It's wisdom,
truly powerful wisdom. And there's some of our underperforming videos, you know, and it hurts, man, because like he's given us gold for free, and like, dude, we got to get the word out on this.
And if you haven't yet, at the very least, and this is something you can do without leaving this video right now, just go down, click on the like button. And that will tell the algorithm that, oh, hey, people who like the Gosslings type stuff might be interested in Stephen Pressfield's type stuff. We have all that, you know, all the tags and everything in the background. We have all that done. So if you like this video, it's going to kind of spread that Stephen Pressfield content to more people. And we want to do that for Steve. We want to do that for Uncle Steve.
Yeah, he deserves everything we could possibly give him. And he asks for nothing in return. I mean, it's truly amazing. Now, you know, I'll buy his books anytime he has like a special or something coming out. I'll always, you know, try and buy as many copies
He's
of
a
it
favorite author. I mean,
it's not exactly like, you know, I'm like, you know, paying taxes or anything. It's like, dude, I'm paying homage, if anything. And I love to give those books away to people. They're built into that package that I had of all of my books and Stephen Pressfield's signed books, which if you're a Patreon member, you have access to. But anyways, Steve is incredibly generous. We'll get into the second half here in a minute. And people seem to, see, like Tricky says, it's truly inspiring. Let's see. Mike Fisher says Steve has life knowledge, wisdom. He really does, man. It's so awesome. So I want to give a couple quick shout outs. One is to Robert Lockheed.
Hey, Robert.
From the Texas Wise Guys show. I need to check out your channel, Robert. I'm really excited that you're here again. I meant to check you guys out last time, but work has been like beating the brakes off me lately. So
we'll do it while we eat sushi.
Yeah, we'll do it while we
after
eat
the live
sushi.
stream tonight. We'll check it out.
And then Melissa Rice is in the chat. What's up, Melissa? We're super excited to see you here as well. So this is awesome, man. We're glad you guys are enjoying it. Melissa says, I love Uncle Steve almost as much as Gary Wayne. And considering, you know, how like intense Gary Wayne's fans are, of which we count ourselves,
Yep.
that's high praise.
That's high praise.
Yeah, I
for
mean,
sure.
Stephen Pressfield is
both
pillar of
masters
the
in their
year.
own spheres, you know.
Really is.
know?
Yeah, yeah, and he needs to be a household name.
Yeah.
So he almost is. I think if we could get him to, if he could like make a Man-at-Arms into a movie.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, right.
It's begging to be a movie.
Yeah,
It's
and
just so good.
like there's so many of his books that would make amazing movies. You know, if they had made Gates of Fire instead of 300, he would be a household name. If they had made Tides of War instead of Alexander, he would be a household name.
Yep.
You know, and this is sort of like the price you pay as a writer,
Yep.
you know, in Hollywood and dealing with all that crap, you know, is that like you never get it's almost always posthumous.
If anyone has read A Man-at-Arms in the chat,
Yeah,
let us know. Who would you cast for Telamon, the main character of A Man-at-Arms?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know who I'd cast.
What's his name?
Henry Caviezel. Or no, Jim Caviezel.
Jim Caviezel.
Jim
Right.
Caviezel.
Okay. Yeah.
He's Jesus. It's just what Jesus said, sir.
That's just what Jesus said, sir.
Bloody do gotta.
He's not the Messiah. He's a naughty boy. It's one of my favorite lines.
You're all different. You've all got to think for yourselves. Yes, we're all different. I'm not. That is irony personified. That like if you are ever having trouble figuring out like what irony really is, watch that scene from Life of Brian.
The Life of Brian.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Cactus says, I want Jay Reese in this chat now.
I know.
She would dig it. She saw it on the Patreon though. She saw the full interview on Patreon, but yeah, she dug it. So
all right. You ready to go?
Yeah.
Ready for the next part?
Let's kick off part 2.
Part 2.
Yeah.
With Uncle Steve.
More of the Foolscap Method with Uncle Steve.
Now, number 5, right under narrative device, I have narrative device number 2. And that is, if we know who's telling the story, who are they telling it to? Which will describe kind of the tone of voice that somebody might take. You know, for instance, in The Sun Also Rises, Hemingway's character is Jake Barnes, who is basically kind of Hemingway himself, right? Who's telling the story. He's the narrator of the story. We see everything through his eyes. But who is he telling it to? He's kind of telling it to us, the readers, as if we're friends of his who are going to get it, right? And when he describes somebody in the story that he's kind of looking down on or making fun of or seeing through, his tone of voice to us is, we're going to get it. You know, let me tell you what an asshole this guy is, and you're going to think the same way, right? Or so, and that's kind of and Holden Caulfield, sort of his tone of voice is very similar. It's like he's talking to a buddy of his. Like, I think the book starts something like this. If you really want to know about it, you're probably going to want to know about my lousy childhood and how I was brought up, but I really don't care about that. You can see how the tone of who he's talking to pulls you in and sets up that whole story. So number 1, who tells the story? Number 2, who are they telling it to? Then, you know, we only have a few more left here. So
that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Number 6 on this thing is theme.
Yeah.
And this is one of the deepest of all and hardest of all things. And that is the question of, what is this damn thing about? You know, what is the story about? Like if it's All Quiet on the Western Front, you could say, oh, it's about World War I, but that's not the theme. That's the subject. The theme is really about mankind's need for war, for some, you know, and the folly of that somebody who has never been in a war thinks, oh, this is going to be great. Our country's going to kick ass and I'm going to come home pinned with medals. And then they get into it and they go, oh my God, what happened? You know, this is real. That's the theme, you know, the endlessness of war and the horror of war. Or if we go to back to Kill a Mockingbird, its theme is about bigotry and prejudice and the judging of our fellow human beings by et cetera, et cetera. Moby Dick, the theme is the kind of monstrousness of nature, including human nature, including Ahab's madness, you know, against, you know. So once we know the theme, then we're 99% of the way through. Because going back again to climax at the very end, a principle of storytelling is hero and villain clash in the climax over the issue of the theme.
Yeah.
So I can give you many examples, but you guys know what I'm talking about, I'm sure. Number 7, this is also really important, inciting incident. And it's kind of really important to know what incident in the story, where does the story start? Most times stories have a period at the top, as you guys know, called the setup.
Yeah.
Right? Where we kind of establish the world a little bit. It's Dorothy, she's in Kansas, you know, she has a little dog named Toto. There are a lot of crazy people around. It's not, you know, and then the moment when the cyclone comes in and picks her up, that's when the story starts, right?
Yeah.
So we have to know that. In the movie Rocky, the inciting incident in the first Rocky is when Apollo Creed, if you remember, the guy he was going to fight for the heavyweight championship of the world is injured and drops out. So Apollo gets out the book of local fighters. He looks through, he sees a guy called the Italian Stallion, Rocky Balboa, and he says, this is it. I'm going to fight this chump. I'm going to give him a chance at the title. That's the inciting incident, right? At that moment, the story starts. Now, 2 things we further know. I'm going way deep into this. I know
I love it. Yes.
2 things we know about the inciting incident is, number 1, the climax is embedded in the inciting incident. For instance, when Rocky gets picked by Apollo Creed 26 minutes into the movie, if we ask what's the climax going to be, we know, oh, it's Rocky fighting Apollo Creed for the heavyweight title. And as we're watching the movie, we go, ooh, that's exciting. I can't wait to see that, you know?
Yeah.
Or in the movie Taken with Liam Neeson, if you remember, his daughter is kidnapped and somehow the bad guys phone him up. This is the inciting incident, you know, about 15 minutes into the movie. And he says to them that famous thing, I have a set of skills that are very dangerous. And if I catch up to you, if you let my daughter go, I won't do anything. But if you don't, I'm going to catch up with you and you're going to regret it. Right.
Yeah.
And the guys say to him, good luck. And they hang up. Right. And now we know the climax is embedded in that moment, because at that moment we know, Liam Neeson is going to catch up to these guys and he's going to kick the shit out of them. Right. And as we're watching, we go, ooh, I can't wait to see that. So, anyway, that's one aspect of an inciting incident. And when we're thinking about our story, we ask ourselves, do we have an inciting incident? Is there a scene where something starts, where Luke Skywalker decides he is going to go off with Obi-Wan Kenobi? And, you know, do we have that? And if we do, we go, oh, okay, great. If we don't, we're in trouble. We got to come up with something.
Yeah.
The other thing about the inciting incident is the hero acquires his or her intention at that point. Like with Luke Skywalker, he now intends to fight against the Empire and to find out who his father, who is a Jedi Knight, is. That's his thing. With Rocky, in the inciting incident, his intention is to train and to fight, right? And Liam Neeson's intention is to find the bad guys and get his daughter back. And that intention carries us through all the way. So again, it's sort of a checkpoint where we ask ourselves, does our hero inquire her intention at this moment? And if she doesn't, then we better rethink it. 2 to go. Number 8 is a pretty easy one, setting. Right? Where and when and whatever will this story work? Like I said, if it's a Western, We know the setting has to be a landscape beyond the law, right? Let's say Game of Thrones. We know that, let's say where are we going to set this? We say to ourselves, oh, I've got this great idea. It's going to be dragons. There's going to be, the wall. There's going to be the wildlings on the other. There's going to be the army of the dead. Oh, this is great. And we ask ourselves, well, where? It's like a Heavenly Realms, Jonathan. It's like, where are we going to set this? And I'm sure that George R.R. Martin thought, should I set it on another planet? Should I set it, whatever? And he finally sort of came up with a kind of an imaginary era around the time of the War of the Roses, right? It was sort of far enough into the past that we basic viewers don't really know anything about it, but not so far that it's, and then we can have castles, we can have dragons, et cetera, et cetera. So we got to pick, a setting that's that's going to work. And the last thing that I have here, number 9, is, if I got this here, the all is lost moment.
Yeah.
And this is this comes from screenwriting. It's sort of a staple of screenwriting that about 3/4 of the way through the movie, or a little bit farther, maybe, the hero comes up to a moment where it's all is lost, right? Where he or she just thinks, I've thrown everything I can at this enemy, and I just can't defeat it. And at that point, immediately after that, the hero has some kind of a breakthrough, and it's really good you almost have to have that moment somewhere. This, again, kind of, Jonathan, it's a little bit like addiction. In fact, a lot of times we come out of addiction when we hit an all is lost moment.
The rock bottom.
We wake up in the gutter with a bottle of Jack Daniels beside us, and we say, my goodness, I've got a problem here.
Yeah.
So an example of an all is lost moment in Rocky, the first Rocky. The night before the fight, the big fight, Rocky's in bed with Adrian, and he can't sleep. And he gets up, gets dressed, and he goes down to the arena where the fight's going to happen tomorrow. And the arena is empty. All the seats are empty, but the ring is there. The big photos or pictures on the wall of Apollo, of Rocky, and he just kind of, his face just falls when he sees this, as he's sort of hit with the reality of what this is, right? He's been training, he's been running through the streets of Philadelphia. Everybody's kind of cheering him, and he thought, and so he goes back home to Adrian, and this is his all is lost moment. He says, who am I kidding? I'm never going to beat this guy. This guy's going to he's going to break my head open, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And there always is a kind of a breakthrough moment right after that. And for Rocky's case, he has what I thought is the best speech in the whole movie. He says to Adrian something like, it really don't matter if this guy opens my head. All I want to do is go the distance with him. Yeah. If that bell rings at the end and I'm still standing, and he says, no one's ever gone the distance with Creed before. But if I can go that distance, I'm going to know for the first time in my life that I weren't just another bum from the neighborhood. Yeah. So those two things, the all is lost moment and the epiphanal moment afterwards, are really critical to know. And if we know all that stuff before we've started, or even as we're working, that really gives us a lot of confidence. I think we can say, you know what, I've got a real story here. This is going to work. I know what it's almost like having a map from New York to San Francisco, where we know, oh, okay, I'm going to go through Chicago, then I'm going to here, I'm going to go to here, to here, to here. So anyway, that's the Foolscap method in one fell swoop.
That's awesome.
I don't always do it. And a lot of times I will do it sort of as I go along. I might have the answer to like 3 of these things at the start, but I'll keep asking the questions, and little by little, I'll kind of fill it in. Anyway, that's the Foolscap method.
That's one thing that I seem to have picked up from watching, several of your videos about this and other things like it is, you seem to be an advocate for just just do it. Just start doing it at some point, you know, like,
Yeah, I am an advocate of that, which is sort of the opposite of the Foolscap Method.
a little
It's
bit,
like,
right?
the Foolscap Method, you're really blocking it out. You're planning it all out. But sometimes it's also good to just plunge right in. But even if you do plunge right in, and I do that quite a bit, I keep going back to these 10 points and a few other points, and sort of like shooting an X-ray through your body. Are we okay on this one? Are we okay on that? Do we have, or another analogy is it's a little like a pilot going through his checklist before he takes off.
Yes.
Do we have the flaps
that's a
down?
good analogy. Yeah.
Are all those things working? Fuel line, is it whatever they do? And once we know all those things, then we can feel more confident as we take off.
Yeah. Well, and yours is so, I mean, I saw Sean had one from StoryGrid, and his is pretty extensive, and
I bet it is.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But I mean, yours it's actionable, and it still is very impactful. It's concise. And it really, really helps organize in a way that lays a foundation, like you say, even if you don't have all of them. If you have some of them on there enough to where you can start working, it gets you going. And I didn't figure out the theme to Empyrean Falling until I was almost done with it. I mean,
I think that's very common.
right? Yeah. I know we're creeping up on time here. I have so many questions and things like, what about Gates of Fire and the Foolscap Method for this? Like, I could ask you, but I know Nick has some really good questions, so I'll defer to him and shut up.
Well, for the sake of time, I have one. I'll only ask you one question related to. We've been talking about the Foolscap Method, and this largely relates to telling a story, a fiction, a novel.
Yes.
But with Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Wants to Be, The War of Art, Do the Work. Is there something like the Foolscap Method that you would employ to organize your thoughts and get ready for the writing of this? What do you use in the case of a nonfiction?
That's a great question, Nick. And I do think that you can apply many of the same principles to this thing. Not that I always do, but you can. Like, let's say it's the War of Art, and we're trying to block it out. And you ask yourself, what's the genre? Okay, the genre is what Sean would call big idea nonfiction, right? A one idea thing, kind of like what Malcolm Gladwell does, the tipping point or something like that.
Sure.
So I would say, who's the hero of the War of Art? A nonfiction with no characters. Who's the hero? The hero is the reader. What is the all is lost moment? The all is lost moment happened to the reader before he or she picked up the book. And that moment was when he or she said, I wish I was a writer, dancer, filmmaker, whatever, but I can't defeat my own bad, juju. Yep. I'm defeated. My dream is broken. I'm never going to make it. So, and then what's the epiphanal moment? The epiphanal moment after that is read this freaking book and you'll learn what to do, right? And narrative device. Who's telling this story? Me as myself, Steve as myself, or as a sort of a version of myself, a little bit more like a boot camp, drill instructor version of myself, a take no prisoners version of myself. But that's who is telling the story. And who am I telling it to? I'm telling it to the hero. The hero is the reader, right? I'm like Obi-Wan Kenobi telling this to Luke Skywalker. So that's sort of, now kind of dictates, Nick, it's sort of the tone of voice that I want to take, which is kind of no bullshit, let's get straight to the point and then get into it. And what's the inciting incident? Like in the very beginning of the War of Art, it sort of says something like, have you ever bought a treadmill and brought it home and found it gathered dust in the attic. Have you ever, tried to quit smoking? And, then what the problem is. And then the villain is resistance with a capital R.
Yeah.
And we introduce the villain right at the start, where we say, more people have, bitten the dust, lost their dreams, gone, because of this than anything else in the world. So in other words, I think you can apply this concept to a TED talk, if you were doing a TED talk, or, pretty much anything. The principles of storytelling apply to nonfiction as well as fiction. Even though you don't literally have a hero, literally have a villain, there is the equivalent in there somewhere.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because the reader is buying a book like that because they want to apply it. Meaning they want to become the hero in their own story. That's why they're buying the book.
Yeah. In fact, pretty much all self-help books are probably like that, right?
Yeah.
The hero is the reader, and the all is lost moment happened before they picked up the book.
So
they
good.
said, I'm in trouble let me read this book and see if it can help me run a marathon or get in shape or whatever.
Yeah. And even if you don't think you're in trouble, you may be in trouble, I mean, I never felt like I was necessarily in trouble big time before I read The War of Art, but reading The War of Art actually showed me how much trouble I was in.
Well, this is what Christians go through every time they read the Bible. They read the Bible and they're like, I'm in trouble. I didn't realize.
My soul is in trouble.
I need to repent.
Well, and I especially love your discussion about the all is lost moment and the epiphanal moment that follows. I mean, it's no different in the story of Jesus with the Garden of Gethsemane.
Exactly.
It's right there. I mean, that's one of the cool things about a lot of these books is they touch on these like archetypal threads that run through just like it's the vibration of like our souls in a lot of ways.
Ooh, that gave me chills when you said that, Jonathan. But it was like at the moment, right, is when Jesus says, let this cup pass from my lips, right?
Right.
That was his moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he sort of sucked it up and said, okay, I've got to do it,
Yep. Not my will, but it'll be done.
And then here comes Peter swinging a sword. Peter's my guy, by the way, because like he's kind of dumb, but he like wants to do the right thing, but he doesn't know how.
Yeah. Peter's excellent because his is the ultimate redemption story.
Right? Yeah. In a lot of ways. Yeah. He's the second chance guy.
He is.
It's like, you just give me one more shot. Just cut me. I'm still good.
Just cut me, Mick.
Yeah, just cut me, baby. I have a question about fiction versus nonfiction, but I wanted to make sure.
I'm good. You go.
Nick mentioned, how the Foolscap Method applies to nonfiction. And I was, after reading Government Cheese, a memoir, I decided, hey, you know what? This reminds me of some of my old nonfiction that I wrote. And so I dusted off some of my nonfiction, a camping trip with this Joker and, a trip to Prague in 2005 and another vacation with a bunch of girls in a bluegrass band out in Colorado that I went on. And
I like that one.
It was
reminiscent.
I wish I could write like that today. It was written in 2015. I must have been reading a lot of you. I don't know. But I'll tell you, I noticed when I was reading over these things that I hadn't looked at in forever, it was like, man, in some of these, I told the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then in others, I like totally whitewashed the bad stuff. And I think in some of them, like in the whitewashing one, it was because maybe my audience or the emotion that I was trying to get out of it required that in my head. I just wanted to ask you, how do you approach nonfiction versus fiction? Is it different? And like, do you apply different kinds of filters to your nonfiction that you don't really apply to your fiction?
I don't think I do approach it differently.
Really? Okay.
Now, of course, I think I've really only other than the books about creativity, like The War of Art, I've only really done 2 nonfiction books, and that's Government Cheese and The Lion's Gate.
Yeah.
And I thought of both of them through the lens of all of this, what's the genre, who's the hero, as particularly in Government Cheese, the question was, what do I want to leave out?
Yeah, exactly.
Because, and I want to leave a lot out. and because of the question of theme. What is this about? And we have to stay with the theme all the way through, and I don't want to go down some other alley just because something actually happened. Doesn't mean I have to tell it in this book.
Yeah.
So, and I definitely looked at it as act 1, act 2, act 3. What is it about? Who's the hero? Who's the villain? So on and so forth.
That's good. I want to real quick, just going back to narrative device, and you were talking about those different works, and who was actually the one telling the story in the story. And my family and I just got done reading Treasure Island, and the narrative device in that is of Jim Hawkins. Up until the point where Jim leaves the shack to go sneak out to the ship and cut the anchor lines. When he leaves to go do that, it's really odd. The narrative changes. All of a sudden, it's Dr. Livesey telling the story about the battle with the pirates.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's a little jarring.
Years. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and then when Jim comes back, it changes back to Jim's narrative for the rest of the book, where he describes what he was doing while he was away.
Wow.
Huh.
And
why did Robert Louis Stevenson do that?
Yeah,
I don't know. I think he wanted to be in two places at the same time because there were two major things moving the story along that had to be explained, but maybe he felt like he was locked into telling it from Jim's perspective and had to force it, maybe, so people understood when Jim came back why things were the way they were.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was really strange.
Glenn Cook's Chronicles of the Black Company kind of did that. It's like this dark fantasy, this kind of low fantasy. Glenn Cook was a Navy veteran from the 80s, and his books are really cool because all the characters, they don't talk like fantasy characters. They're just like everymen, and it has this, like, you could tell he was in the military because like all these mercenaries in this thing called the Black Company, they're like, they're just dudes doing a job, and they're great. It's so much fun. And the first book it's like that. It's like, it's all told first person perspective, by the physician of the Legion, the Black Company. And then in the second book, all of a sudden he kind of reverts back to like that standard fantasy trope of having multiple points of view from multiple characters, and you kind of are just like, you had it. You know what I mean? Like, it was cool, and then we're back to this again.
Okay. So in other words, it didn't work, Jonathan. Is that what you're saying?
It really, not for me. No, it's totally subjective. I got a good friend who introduced me to him, and he loved that because he found the other characters to be compelling and more vulnerable. But for me, I was like, man, I like just like this. I know it's a little one-dimensional, but like, this is a cool vibe that we have going with this one guy, because he was the chronicler of the Legion. He was the analyst, and so
I guess the bottom line is you can break rules, but you have to know what the rules are, be able to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to break this one now.
And have a good reason to break them too. But I was always really impressed with Gates of Fire's narrative device, because it's the slave Ziones. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah, who knows? I don't know.
Who knows? Yeah. Fair. All right. I always get my Greek gut check from Steve. And he's one of the only survivors of the Battle of Thermopylae, and he is giving his accounting of his experience, telling King Xerxes about the Spartans. So it becomes like this really cool first person reminiscent. And I noticed in doing that myself, in my attempts to do that in my fiction, it becomes very restrictive in what you can tell, because everything you're doing is through that perspective. Have you ever had a problem where you started doing that and then you realized that the story maybe needed a different narrative device along the way somewhere?
Well, actually, like in Tides of War,
Yeah.
the story, there's actually 3, even 4 narrators, you know,
Yeah.
and s- for that exact reason, Jonathan, like
Really?
a certain person, one guy has access to he was at a certain place at a certain time and he could tell you that story, but then another person had to be brought in to be in a different place at a different time. But what I tried to do was kind of like Russian dolls, make those narratives nest inside one another, so that
Yeah.
the one guy was telling the story, he was telling it to guy number 2,
Mm-hmm.
who was then telling it to his grandson. And so they all sort of hopefully fit together. But yeah, definitely one character could not tell that whole story.
Yeah.
So
And
I'm
yet it's
sure writers have done 20 characters and made it work, somewhere.
probably, yeah, way better writers than me. So
Me
I
too.
don't know.
Me too.
But and even when you talk about climax, I think back to the virtues of war about Alexander the Great, which is one of your best written historical fiction books. And there's that scene in the end, where Telamon, the mercenary captain Telamon, is there, and he's departing to go study with the Swamis, and before he goes, he shakes hands with Alexander, and he pulls him in. He's like, "Come with me," And Alexander, he has that moment where he thinks, maybe I can.
Maybe you can.
Yeah. And then he breaks, and
Yeah.
he's like, no, I gotta, the army is calling me, and he hops up on the horse and there's a valedictory look between them, and the wind sweeps his cape and he rides off, to this
And
thing
that
that
was a
he's
case
changed to,
where I switched narrators at the very
Yeah.
end. Like the story starts in Alexander's voice, and he's to a young page of his, that's his nephew, I'm going to tell you my story. And at the very end, that last chapter, because Alexander couldn't really tell that story.
Right.
So it sort of switches to the young boy, the young page, in reminiscence.
Mm-hmm.
And he's telling it in the past. So you can do that. It does work.
And it's not jarring in that case because as the reader, Alexander, like they say, Alexander can't tell that part.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You got to have that outside look. And yeah. So you're right. Yeah, I guess you can break the rules if you know what the rules are. Hey, Steve, before we go, I do this with all our guests now. Our motto is take up the broken sword and strike down the darkness. Real quick before you go, any words of wisdom to help our audience strike down the darkness?
I don't know. I think, I don't know. It's like I always say, well, we started off talking about addiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, this racket of following your calling, following your vocation, whatever it is, ain't easy. And there are a lot of pitfalls along the way, including addictions of various kinds. So just sort of take up the broken sword of your father and, kick some ass. That's what you're going to have to do.
Kick some ass. That's right. Stephen Pressfield, Uncle Steve, thank you so much.
Hey, it's great talking to you guys, Nick and Jonathan. You're my favorite nephews.
You're our favorite uncle,
Your
baby.
favorite uncle.
All right.
Love you, Uncle Steve.
Have a good one. All right.
Bye-bye.
See you next time.
See you next
Sounds
time.
Great.
Okay.
Bye.
Hey, if you guys have been enjoying this interview and you'd like to hear the rest of it, including some really down and dirty stuff that we're not allowed to say here on YouTube, head over to patreon.com/the Gosslings. We'd love to have your support there and share exclusive content with you.
That's right. Keep it cool. And remember, these are interviews that strike down the darkness.
They do indeed strike down the darkness. They strike down all the darkness.
That's right. Strike it down hard.
So hard.
So hard. All right.
What up, everybody?
Yeah. Pretty awesome, right? I'm telling you, man.
Thanks for hanging in there with us, guys. The chat on my end stopped about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And I can't get anything to post. I've been trying to. I'm going to try to. Let's see. I'm going to put Yo Tricky.
I got it on my phone. I'm keeping up with the chat on my phone.
So our streaming platform is lackluster, let's say, to say the least.
Taking a dump.
Sorry, because I've been looking at these comments. I'm like, I'm trying to reply to you guys, and it hasn't worked. It hasn't been working on my end. Technical issues. Hope you guys enjoyed the interview with Stephen Pressfield. I look forward to having him back in a few months.
Yeah, we have him every quarter. And we have him basically every 3 months to talk about this. And honestly, we could do every episode probably for the next year. We could have at least one segment where we talk about the Foolscap Method.
Oh, yeah.
As it relates to his books and what he sees in other books and writers. And, I know that a lot of times we deal more in like the Christian esoterica stuff, but this is kind of our core bread and butter in a lot of ways, is talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And while we were streaming, I realized that I am, being dyslexic, I misspelled Foolscap in the title of this video. I'm going to go back and fix that. ASAP.
Foolscap.
Foolscap.
The Norwegian Foolscap Method.
Well, that's my version of the Foolscap Method.
Yeah, it's because he's 8 feet tall. He's got that Norwegian DNA somewhere in there, Yes, let's see. I'll run down the chat here.
Yeah.
Mike Fisher says, like that point by Steve, the Russian nesting dolls as stories within stories to connect the macro story to the many micro stories together. Excellent point.
Yeah,
Mike. Very true. Cactus says, anybody here read 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez?
Never read that. He
was a commie with nasty content, but his style is so great. There are a lot of authors that are like that. I really enjoyed a Serbian writer named Milorad Pavic, who really taught me a lot about using the physical layout and format of your book to add a layer of storytelling to the narrative. It was very interesting. He wrote a book called Dictionary of the Khazars, which was almost like a triptych. I totally copied it for Triptych Codex, actually. He tells the same story within 3 volumes: the red book, the green book, and the yellow book, I believe. And it's literally, the story is told in like dictionary format, names, places, people, events, all listed in alphabetical order.
Okay.
And as you read the book, you can either read each book, red, green, and yellow book within the Dictionary of the Khazars has all those same entries in it. So you can like read each entry in each of the 3 sub books to get like the full thread of that character.
That's cool.
Or you can read it linearly.
Putting that together must have been a headache.
Dude, it was crazy good. He wrote it back in the 80s. And so it's very cool. He wrote this other one called Hero and Leander, The Inner Side of the Wind, which was a love story between, it's kind of a retelling of the myth, the Greek myth of Hero and Leander. Hero is the girl, Leander is the guy, and Hero exists in Milorad Pavic's book. Hero exists in modern day, and then Leander is like a 18th century Cossack, I believe.
Okay.
And so it's about this love story over time, and the book is divided into 2 halves: the story of Hero and the story of Leander. So you read the story of Hero, and it's her journey from her perspective. And at the end of her story is when she finally meets Leander. And then you flip the book over, and it's the story of Leander. Like, you literally flip the book over, open the page, the story of Leander, and you read his story as he's traveling through time through his perspective until he eventually meets, literally where where the pages physically meet is where they finally meet in the story.
Cool.
Yeah, dude, it's wild.
Yeah, that's cool.
There's a lot of like really cool ways to incorporate your story out there. Even if like the content is a little questionable, or the style, whatever it is, there's gems you can pluck from anything. So Mike Fisher says, great podcast, Goss Brothers and Steve.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mike. Chris Cap says, that was an awesome interview. We agree. Thank you. Cactus says, great show. Robert Lockheed says, excellent interview. Let's see. And then, Will Bentaker says, great show so far. Man, we really appreciate everybody tuning in for an Uncle Steve show, because we know it's not like Gary Wayne, Derek Gilbert, and all the other stuff, but like we really, really believe in Stephen Pressfield.
Absolutely.
Man.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, go check his books out. Go to Stephen Press. It's stephenpressfield.com.
Yep.
Is his website. Very simple. Stephen Pressfield. Stephen with a V.
Yeah.
Pressfield.com.
V for victory.
Yeah. And get a Man at Arms. I know he's got some others. If you like the nonfiction stuff, like kind of like writing and resistance, there's The War of Art. There's Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Wants to Be.
Yep.
Read his memoir, Government Cheese. But his most recent fiction is A Man at Arms. And it is so good.
Yeah. And that's initially how we got connected with Steve.
Yeah.
Was he was doing his promo for Man at Arms.
Yeah.
And part of the package was you could pay for a 30-minute interview or just talk, Zoom call. And we parlayed that into an interview. And
he was gracious enough to let us actually do a live stream with him.
Yeah. Lord works in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
So, and we've been very fortunate to have him in our corner ever since.
Yeah.
And he's just got tons of great fiction. I mean, literally, Gates of Fire is my favorite book of all time, and I can't tell you how many times I've reread it, and wouldn't know about it if it weren't for this guy. So,
I mean, I've read Legend of Bagger Vance, Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Wants to Be, A Man at Arms, Government Cheese, all within the last year.
Yeah, right.
And I'm ready for what's next, Uncle Steve.
I know, man.
Ready for the next one.
I know.
I'll devour it.
To ask him what he was working on next. He's got some other really cool books too. The Knowledge is an interesting one. That's kind of like
The Warrior Ethos.
Oh, the Warrior Ethos is so good.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, the Warrior Ethos is an amazing little motivational book. I really enjoyed his near future book, The Profession, which is in a weird way. In fact, you were talking about this earlier. Is kind of a retelling of Caesar's acquisition of the Roman Empire, or the creation of the Roman Empire. And
The Profession?
Yeah, The Profession. It's set in the near future, and it's about a mercenary colonel who is attached to this very magnanimous kind of general character, almost like a Patton or who's the one that everybody who was on Trump's team for a little while.
Mattis. Millie.
No,
Mattis. Yeah, not Millie.
Kind of like Mad Dog Mattis.
Yeah, Mad Dog.
And it's like, and he starts to parlay into like this political thing to like wrest control of America from the degenerate, politicians. And it's just a really cool adventure. But the first 5 pages, he's mastered the first 5 pages with The Profession. So
yeah, cool.
He's done a wide array of stuff that is all worth reading. But and I'd love the chance. It's so funny. Like, I'm a fan, so I want to just ask Stephen Pressfield tons of questions, about his books. But Steve's not that guy. Steve's the guy who, like, he's so humble and he's so kind. He wants to talk about other writers and he wants to talk about other concepts.
Yeah.
If I had my way, I'd just be like, "You remember that time?" I'm like Chris Farley and all those Saturday Night Live interviews.
That was cool.
Yeah. You remember that time when Alexander the Great, was invading and he had that big battle with the Persians at Gaugamela? That was cool. I have to remember to just be cool, dude.
I have to remind him to breathe every time we talk to Steve.
A little bit. I mean, it's kind of like talking to George Lucas, man.
Yeah.
How do you contain, someone who has codified your passion?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. But he's very generous and he puts up with my fangirl crap. He's very magnanimous.
Big girl over here.
So, yeah. Tricky says, outstanding interview. I will be sharing it madly.
Thank you, Tricky.
Thank you, Tricky.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please do. Get the word out about Uncle Steve.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about our books real quick.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
Let's talk about yours first.
Sure.
Go for it.
So Nick and I are Christian authors. In fact, that's how the Gosslings got started. We got started as a writers group. And we have since turned it into this amazing show with you guys. But at the end of the day, we are still authors. And I wrote a 7-novel series about the wars between the angels called Heavenly Realms. And the first book in the series, Empyrean Falling, is up on your screen right now. There's the QR code for it. You can get it on Amazon in paperback and ebook and audiobook. All of my audiobooks are narrated by Adam Burrell, who sounds like Alan Rickman. He is an amazing talent.
Yep.
And it is Christian angelic war fiction. It is meant for fighting age males, but I've noticed a lot of women seem to enjoy it too, which I find blissfully surprising and awesome. So, but it is, it's Christian fiction, kind of like if you took Gettysburg and 300 and Kingdom of Heaven and the Book of Revelations, and kind of mixed them together. It's very warlike. It's kind of like Rome Total War meets Revelations, and Michael is kind of the main character, at least in the first book he is. And then, he has his brothers. Michael the Archangel is the middle brother, and Lucifer is the eldest archangelic brother, and then Gabriel is the baby archangelic brother, and they have their angels. There are side characters. There's a lot of creative liberties that I had to take in order to craft an actual story out of it and build a creative world. But it was fun. And it took probably 20 years from the time I started writing it until I finally started getting them published. And people seem to really enjoy it for its visceral, warlike nature and the really human theology and philosophy. The angels in my stories, they're all male and they all just look like us, but they have wings and fiery eyes. And really, their struggles are our struggles. I wanted to tell stories of the human condition and what we go through as humans, but dressed up and recodified in this angelic garb. So a lot of people sometimes are like, oh, well, why don't you have the fiery wheels with eyes, or why don't you have the chimera? I'm like, dude, I mean, there are better writers out there who could do that. I'm not that guy, because I don't want a hat on a hat. I want it to be accessible. And I think it is accessible. I think you might really get a lot out of it. You might a lot of the struggles of the characters were or are my personal struggles. And so a lot of it was therapeutic in nature. And I think that it really resonates with a lot of people. So I always kind of figured maybe it was maybe these were the stories that the Crusaders told around their campfires.
There you go.
Crack de Chevaliers.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyways, Heavenly Realms, available on Amazon by me, Jonathan Goss. Empyrean Falling is the first book. There are 7 in the series, and the 7th is being edited right now. So the series is finished. It's been finished for 10 years. So don't worry, I'm not going to pull a George R.R. Martin on you. It's all there. So anyways, hope you enjoy it. We got to get that sound bite. Nick, tell them about Henry Half Moon.
Henry Half Moon is a paranormal urban fantasy about a young, well, I say young, he's a college student, so you assume that he's young. He is in Manhattan. And he doesn't really believe in the supernatural, doesn't believe in God, but he loves this one really squirrely professor who introduces him to this interdimensional reality in which Henry gets trapped and has to fight a new race of demon called the Algolim, trying to usher in the return of the Anunnaki and the Beast. It's got everything from Nephilim to the Babylon working to Greek mythology. There's all sorts of things weaved into it.
Yeah.
But he goes on a rip-roaring journey, meets the angel of death. It's not what you think. And it's all from first-person perspective. So we were talking about narrative device with Uncle Steve, and this is first person. This is all through Henry's perspective, what he's seeing as he's seeing it in real time. And the audiobook is particularly good. But check it out. $9 for the paperback. And it's a quick read, but it's a great story. You'll really enjoy it. It's fun, and it'll make you question. You'll recognize some things if you watch this channel, and you've heard a lot of our guests talk, like Derek Gilbert, Gary Wayne. You're going to recognize a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah.
So check it out, Henry Half Moon. I did it under a pen name, Huck Warwick's, so my middle grade readers wouldn't accidentally buy it and be traumatized by some of the more.
It's the most metal thing Nick has ever written. It's so cool.
Ooh, metal, I like that.
It's got a metal vibe to it.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
There are a couple scenes in that book where it's just you can hear Merciful Fate playing in the background. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah,
it's good.
Let's see. Tricky says, I wait for these chat sessions all week. They are the highlight of my week. You guys are great,
dude. I'm so sorry that our chat is broken through our platform here, because I want to put it up on the screen.
It's all right. I got a backup. Jay Reese Bradley's here.
Yay, Jay Reese.
Everybody should check out Jay Reese Bradley's channel, JBL Live. She is a fellow middle grade fiction author and
JRB.
Yeah,
that's JRB Live.
JRB Live. She is the author of the Brumbltide series.
Yep.
and she is a near and dear friend of the channel. She is the baby sister we never asked for, and we love her dearly. She was on this past Thursday. She is the teller of the whale joke.
That's right. Yeah, go back and listen to the whale joke.
Yeah,
So
it's
good.
absolutely great. But she interviews a bunch of really cool authors too, and she is also an author. Her books are available. She is definitely worth checking out. She says Satan is a super interesting character in Jay's books. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Jay. Yeah, Satan, kind of like an Anakin Vader thing. Lucifer turns into Satan, and it's like that actually kind of kept me from being published for a long time because Christian publishers didn't like how violent it was, and they didn't like that like Lucifer had good arguments. But it's like, I mean, he has to.
Yeah.
Like, what's the point otherwise? So let's see. Chris Cap says, I always think Jay's Devil is like that Luciferian Lucifer series. Yeah. I've watched a few scenes from Lucifer. This will be a little like self-aggrandizing and self-pitying of me, but like I did shop that around. Like Heavenly Realms did get into a network of people. And like ever since then, everybody was like, no, we don't want it. But like ever since then, I've noticed some things pop up where I'm like,
yeah.
I think you maybe just peeled off a little. Pinched off a little. No, probably not. Obviously, it's probably just like.
What if they did?
Honestly,
yeah.
Not Lucifer's daddy issues in that show are like one of the core themes. Of Heavenly Realms, of Empyrean Falling. It's just. But welcome to being a writer where you'll be like neurotic and paranoid about everything. Cactus Kicker says, I need to get Half Moon next. Dude, you'll love it. It's so cool.
I think you'll like it.
Tricky says, I would imagine that there was a time when Lucifer was a very charismatic and interesting entity. Shame he's forgotten how to be exactly that. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. There's actually this, like, as the series goes on, Satan, like, becomes like kind of tired of the mess he's made for himself, because like if you notice in wars, like people forget why they chose the side and they lose the passion. And there's like regret that goes on and people get tired. And so like I think absolutely. Let's see. Jerry says, thanks big bros. Wham! Whale emoji. Dude, it's so funny. Yeah. Chris Cap says, such a sinister baby sister.
That was a great story. It just reminds me, we have so on the next Thirsty Thursday, this coming Thursday, we're going to be interviewing Roxana.
Yes.
Roxana Bow Arts. And we need to send her the questions.
Oh, we do.
Got to send her the questions.
Yeah, our 5-minute freak questions.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, we've only done 2 Thirsty Thursday live streams so far. But we're super excited about them. And I think as the show evolves, we will sort of format it into certain things because we do have some really cool ideas. In fact, can we tell them about the 5-minute freak? Patreon?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So like, okay. Actually, can you put the Patreon up while I talk about
Absolutely.
This? So the Gosslings obviously has a Patreon. In fact, I think pretty much everybody in the chat today is a patron.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, just about there might be 1 or 2 who aren't, but just about everybody is. And I want to say, like, first of all, thank you. It helps us out tremendously. We need a new computer. I literally wrote down buy keyboard and we need new chairs.
Yeah.
So we need a new keyboard. We need new chairs. We need a new computer. And like, everybody's struggling, so we get it. But we just want you guys to know that like the money that you guys do invest in the patron or super chats or the ad revenue we get from stuff, that actually is like going towards improving the channel so that we can have, back of house infrastructure.
And it might be going to a different streaming platform subscription because the one we're using tonight has been giving us some issues. So we might have to retool a little bit. Sorry if there are any glitches on your end, guys.
Yeah. But one of the cool things, we offer a lot of things to our patrons. One of them is the full unedited interviews. Where we ask Patreon specific questions. There are a lot of things that we like to talk about on this channel that we cannot talk about due to YouTube's censorship algorithms, and it has gotten us channel strikes in the past. So we protect the channel by, asking those questions that people want asked. In fact, certain levels of the Patreon allow you to submit questions that we will then field to the guest for the interviews. But it also allows us to protect the channel while still being able to talk about those topics. And we post those interviews directly to the Patreon. Usually the next day. So like just about everybody here who has joined us tonight in the chat has actually already seen the full Stephen Pressfield interview. And so it's highly complimentary that you guys are here. We really appreciate that. But one of the things that we are going to also do on top of like the digital downloads and the discounts on merch, the exclusive like stickers, I think Chris Caps maybe.
Yeah, he said he got a sticker today.
Got his sticker in the mail.
Again, I couldn't comment and say, yeah, I'm so glad you got your sticker. So
yeah. And the stickers always ship. If you like signed up for like the tier that gets you the sticker and the mug, the sticker always seems to arrive before the mug. So don't worry, like,
it's coming.
It's coming. Yeah. You also get like signed copies of our books, exclusive t-shirts. There's just tons of stuff. We dogpiled that Patreon with everything we think we could possibly want if we were you guys, and also everything that we could like handle and afford, but one of the cool things that we are going to do is we're going to have 5 Minute Freak, which is like you saw the questions we asked Jay Reese Bradley in our previous Thirsty Thursday. So that's a segment that we want to do for each Thirsty Thursday, either with our guest,
if we have one,
or with a patron. And we will submit those questions to you guys, and then you can record yourselves answering them, send the video back to us, and then we play the video.
We will play the video.
Yeah. And it's a cool opportunity for you to like promote, maybe whatever you have going on, or talk about yourself.
We want to highlight you guys. We want to showcase you guys on those Thirsty Thursdays. Thank you. So I know you guys got some good jokes out there. Y'all are holding back on me.
Yeah.
And people deserve to know.
Yeah. Yes, they do.
They deserve to know.
Yep. Cactus Kicker says, got a phone call. Must go. Love you all. Love you too, Cactus.
See you, Cactus.
Keep strong, baby. Yeah. Let's see. Chris says, I got my sticker. Yes, I got to figure out where to put it. Don't ask Tricky or Cactus. They might give you some.
I'll tell you where to put your sticker.
They might give you some suggestions. We got a $5 or $4.99 super chat from Mike Fisher.
Thank you, Mike.
It says, faith, trust, hope, build it, and they will come, Goss Brothers.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mike.
You're so right. It's taken us a long time to get here. And by the way, I will let you guys know, Nick and I have been tempted, but we have never once artificially inflated any of our numbers.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, you could obviously tell by looking at our numbers.
We have not.
But I mean, it's not hard to do.
No bots.
No
bots. No fake views. We don't run separate YouTube profiles, all watching the video to add up. We don't do any of that.
No, you can do that, but
don't do that.
But we do not. That. And we've never paid for any numbers. This is like a true grassroots, authentic, 100% honest, homegrown channel.
Yep. 100%.
We really like Nick and I are big about passion over paycheck. And that's why I laugh so hard when people like accuse us of being money changers. It's like, dude, if you only had
you're grinding over here, man. Come on, give me a break.
Like it's insane. So let's see. Oh yeah, Jay Reese says, although you did not tell me to be ready with a joke. No, I know we didn't, but that's what makes it funny.
That was wait a minute. No, that was the first question. What is your favorite joke? Or what is one of your favorite jokes?
Was it in the
I think so. Well, if you didn't see it and you felt like it was short notice, you did amazing. It was amazing.
Yep.
It was really good.
So awesome. Let's see. Is there anything else we want to put up there before we check out? We're pushing 8 o'clock.
I know we gotta get going here.
She says it was not. I'll show you the text. All right, easy, baby sister. I'll tell you, ever since like Jay
show
Reese,
me the text.
Yeah, ever since Jay Reese has like reframed herself as my baby sister, it has changed like how I treat her. And now I treat her like my baby sister. So, I don't know if that's good or bad. It'll probably get me in trouble at some point. Well, we love Jay. She's
absolutely. Absolutely.
And we're looking forward. We need to have you and Shannon back on that at the same time. We'd love to have both.
That'd be a good Thursday episode.
That would be cool.
Could be so fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, give a shout out to our patrons, those who support us.
Yeah.
And then we'll sign off, and we will see you guys on Thursday night.
Yes.
With Roxana. And then next Sunday, we'll be streaming our interview that we had today with Tim Cohen as we review the coronation of Charles III.
We had an awesome interview.
It
And
was
by the way,
good.
like,
you'll see it tomorrow if you're a patron. You get the whole thing.
and dude, I'll tell you, we talked for 45 minutes in like the patron only.
Just the exclusive.
Yeah, and that was one of the best. That was my favorite part of the whole interview. And I'm not like saying this just to like sell it. Like truly, sometimes the Patreon exclusive stuff is so good. I feel bad that like we only have that for the Patreon. We have to because of like what we talk about there. And it's like, man, I wish more people were in on this because this is really, really good. But it was my favorite part.
Yeah.
We talked for 45 minutes about some things, AI being one of them,
Mm-hmm.
and some other things around the transhumanism agenda, depopulation, Elon Musk, all that kind of stuff. Tim had some really, really cool things, and it was my favorite. It was my personal favorite conversation that we've had with him. So
Mine
far.
too, actually.
And then we got like a whole other 2 hours
Yeah.
about the coronation.
Yeah, we got almost.
And
3
the
hours
only
or so.
reason we had to like stop was because we had 10 minutes before we were supposed to go live.
Yeah.
And
we started recording like right at 3:00, and then 5:45 we had to be like, dude, we gotta go. I'm so sorry.
I know. And he was really generous because he originally said 2.5 hours max, and he went 2 hours and 45 minutes. He probably would have gone a little bit longer. I had to pee so bad, my hands were sweating. So, so I'm sorry, Tim. But
that's great.
But yeah, Tim's great. So we'll do that one next Sunday, and we hope everybody is here for it. And then Thursday we'll be with Roxana at 8 p.m. Central Time, talking about AI and artwork and whatever she has going on. She's done some amazing artwork for me in the past, and we love Roxana. She's pretty killer.
And tomorrow's Memorial Day, so hope you guys enjoy it. Take a day off.
Yes.
Enjoy your families. Enjoy the sunshine if you have it. Enjoy not working. Watch a ton of Gosslings videos if you don't have anything else to do.
Yeah.
Or read a book.
Or read a book.
Read Man at Arms.
Reading Rainbow.
Don't read any rainbows. We're gonna get enough rainbows over the next month.
I'm taking the rainbow back.
Let's take it back.
Yeah. Get LeVar Burton in here.
Man, I wish
Get
I
in
could
here,
start,
Jordy.
I wish I could start our music, but like I said, we're having platform issues. So I'm just gonna go through these real quick. Starting with you do the music in the background. Our Spartan level patron, Goss Hog Lift. Go to @GossHogLifts on Instagram for fitness content that inspires young men to reclaim their identity and purpose in a generation of darkness. Beautiful. Such a beautiful thing. You're doing so. Keep it up. Keep going. Hemingway level patrons. Greg W., Patricia R., Tim S., Jody, American Cars, tricky subject in the chat tonight. Man, appreciate you guys. You are the backbone. Thank you so much for your generous support. And our Orwell level patrons. This is our most popular level. A lot of great benefits here. Kelly, Keena, Karen, Nancy, Rita, Orlando, Mark, Joshua, Courtney, Bob, Margaret, Julie, Rudalee, Savannah, Bay, Joshua, Lenka, Lanya, Melissa, Vicky, Kelly, Marcia. And shout out to Jabber, Charmaine, Jerry, Marcia, Cheryl, Chris Caps in the chat tonight. Karen B, Canine Training, Mama Shaw OC, Cascadian Breeze, Gabe Bella Music, Mike Fisher. Thank you for joining us tonight. Carol, Jamie J, Sean, Sunny, Michelle, Charlotte. We love you guys. And again, if you want to join us, join this army of free thinking Christian authors. If you want official membership in this dark lit digital speakeasy, go to patreon.com/the Gosslings and sign up. Multiple levels. I'm sure you'll find something there that you will get a lot out of. We love you guys, and I think that's it.
Nice.
Well done. Very good.
Bay's not one of our patrons anymore, so we need to knock her
Oh,
out.
really?
Yeah, sorry.
Bye, Bay.
Bye, Bay. All right.
This is the most unconventional YouTube thing ever. Bye.
Bye. Well, bye.
Bye, Baylisha.
That's one we need. That's one. Well,
yeah, I got to do that. Yeah, I got the I'm Your Huckleberry. Of course, can't hear it tonight.
Oh, you requested Phil Collins in the air tonight? Ah. Dude, that is I got a thing where I say like that is quantifiably the greatest song ever made
It's a good one.
because the 80s was the greatest decade for music and that's the greatest song from the 80s. Therefore, logically, ipso facto, that is the greatest song ever made.
Was that 80s or was that 90?
I think that was 80s.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, because it was.
I'll take your word for it.
I think so.
Fact check us.
Yeah.
Fact check us on that.
Fact check. Fact
Let
check.
us know next week.
Yeah. I know, 'cause we're running late.
We are running way late.
You
They're
guys
gonna, they're gonna shut down the sushi bar if we're not
I know.
judicious about this.
Yeah, I can feel it. I can feel it calling in the in the air tonight.
All right. Well, you want to do the sign off?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Jonathan. It's Luciferian.
I'm Nick. I'm your Huckleberry.
And we are the Gosslings. Go forth.
And strike down the darkness.